sorry! Please!
Hi, my name is Nicole, and I'm a lead story artist. We take the script from the writer or director, and then we help visualize what the movie could look like, what the settings look like, the emotions, the way the character acts. It's a lot of visual thinking just to make the movie as compelling as it can be. So this is the tool that I use to draw most of my storyboards. We don't use paper as much anymore. I joined Hoppers when they were doing the very first screening. So a lot of things, of course, very fluid.
So you had some script pages,
yeah.
Right?
It literally says there's this bear that comes out and grabs Loaf, the beaver. Maddie Sharafian, who was the story supervisor at the time, she gave us a lineup of the characters, and she drew them in this chunky character style, which I followed what she did, and also give my flavor to it. I was digging up an old version of Bear Intervention, and we came upon this old version of Loaf, who I drew much fatter. So we did that. So I guess in my mind already, I kind of have a picture of what this could look like. Of course, there's going to be a bush here because Ellen has to come out of it. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. And then we want the creek just big enough so that in the end, of course, we want Mabel to be at a certain distance from Loaf. Also, I wanted the camera to be slightly farther from Mabel just to really get a sense of how big Ellen is compared to her. So that was another way to really think about the composition of this particular shot. Usually we go into a story room, we call it the fishbowl, and we'll just pitch it and do all the voices and the narration. Ellen comes out of the bushes, really big voice. So you get the feeling of it. And then you do the voices oh no. And then that's it. All that stuff, all that fun stuff. It's also really rewarding that, I'm giving the blueprints for, the artists and the people down the pipeline. I saw a painting that looked like a drawing that I did initially, where he painted all the colors and the lighting. I was like, oh my gosh, that was my board. I'm just I really love putting conveying emotions, the characters, and finding the right sort of acting. But yeah, it's really fun. I love it.
So for Hoppers, my first mission here was finding its own unique tone and mood, colors and lights to show the perfect emotion and beat. Hi, my name is Haesung. I'm art director of Hoppers. So this is the color script. Everyone visualize the images in their own way when they read the script. So somehow we have to sync up everyone's imagination together. So color script is the one doing that. So for this shot, I discussed much with our director Daniel, what this scene is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like. So the first thing I do is looking for a lot of references. I went to a field trip with our art crew to Colorado. We saw a lot of beautiful plant and locations. So these are the references that I used to figure out what kind of look we need for this shot. We wanted this area feel very hidden and secret, human never have been here before. So I decided to put a lot of trees and bushes, almost covering the whole space. And then Love is peacefully resting over here, which means we wanted this area to be a little more cozy and warm, which we were missing here. So I added some sunlights in, which it warm up the space much. And then like Ellen Bear break into this peaceful situation and then like turn this into terror, which, you know, like we tried to show two different like vibes in one scene.
You present these images to the director and he reviews it. Does he give you feedback?
Oh yeah, he gave me a lot of feedback. Yeah, at one point I said like this will be final, and you know, this, I think you're gonna like this. But you know, after that, you know, like I had other like final. But that's kind of like that's how it works here. You know, we make a lot of finals.
In sets, we want to make it feel like the world is much bigger than what we're building. I'm Christina Garcia-Weiland, and I was the lead set dresser on Hop. We start with a previs, which comes from the art department. It's all kind of just an indicator of the feel of the set. And for this, it was the first sequence in production. And so one of my jobs was to help find the actual look. What is it going to feel like when we have a final finished frame? We have a lead modeler whose name was Mike Altman, and his job was to go in and start with the terrain to make sure that we're having the characters at the right height, that there's enough detail in there that we can start breaking it down into individual pieces and start replacing trees and plants, refining them and giving them more detail, testing out new models. And we go through several different iterations. You'll notice like there was only a certain amount of ground, and we don't build the ground beyond what we need, but we're going to be moving up and down the stream. So we want to make sure that we give ourselves not just enough room for the action, but also enough space so that we're not looking into a blank horizon. We have a lot of tricks to do that with set extensions, models that we can kind of add in the background that are a lot less detailed, but they still give this sense of more beyond the horizon. But sometimes it's also paintings of the sky, or it'll be a combination of both. But then the other concern that we have is managing the complexity, because as you can imagine, you have a sequence with 100 shots, they're moving everywhere. And you have to make sure that the set is really consistent between all these shots, even if you kind of have to cheat to move something. It's not there in any of the other shots, but we have to make it look like it's always been there, even if it's only for one shot. Also, the blur is our friend a lot of the time. We always take that into account as we're doing it. We're like, how much are we actually going to see detail? Dressing is one of those disciplines where we kind of stay with the shot throughout production. We are working with animation to make sure like they need something just a little bit larger because they want to do something different with Ellen than we had expected. But then we're also working with the effects artist where we make sure that they have the assets like these weird leaves, and we're working with the lighters because you get a lot of leaves in there and it starts getting super dense and not enough light is coming through the canopy of the trees. Everyone is working on top of everyone else, and we're all trying to come to something where everyone is happy with the work that's been done. And hopefully we'll show it to the director and they'll be like, final, this is great, print.
Hello, my name is Andrea Go and I'm a layout lead on Hoppers. We are a department that does camera and staging. And then we also think about the cinematography, like how do we shoot this? Like what kind of lens, what kind of angles? This is the very first one that went into production for us. Ellen Bear jumps out to try to eat Loaf, the beaver. The intent of the shot was actually for it to feel like Ellen Bear was coming at Mabel Beaver, and then she was actually after Loaf. So it has to be really scary and coming at you on the camera as if you were Mabel almost getting eaten. So my step was she would come out of the bush from the side and then sort of pivots and then come at camera. But the reality of the set is the river is huge and it just feels like she's witnessing something far away from her, which makes it less scary. So they were like, let's try other ways to shoot this. And so we came up with a lot of alternative shots. We call it alts. We were saying this could be a lock-off, or we can also do like a snap zoom just to increase the intensity, or track with her as she's running towards Loaf. We pitched like, oh, maybe we can be over shoulder, since then we'll be more from her point of view, just to increase the intensity. But the bear quickly kind of just like exited frame. So we were onto something, but it was still kind of like, I don't know if it's working. So this one is the pan. So we combo stuff, we kind of track, have everything, have Loaf come out and have her realize, and then a whip pan, and then the bear comes forward. From this exploration of alts, we noticed like we like the pan, we like the over the shoulder. Let's combine that. From looking right at Mabel, then we can do a whip pan to her over shoulder, and then the bear jumps out. So we managed to solve being close to her, feeling what she's feeling, the urgency, and whip panning over there. The bear sort of jumps towards us to like get that feeling. So that's how we solved it.
I'm Rob Denovan, and I'm an animator here at PIXAR. Our job is to do the performance of that character based on what the directors have asked for. So layout gave us Ellen Bear kind of bursting through the trees. And this was great because there was a lot of energy to it. I could tell looking at it here that that bear was traveling quite a bit of distance, like 15 feet, to get close to camera. So I wanted to see what would happen if I just treated it as physically accurate as possible. And just as a proof of concept, I'd shown Daniel, the director, this here. And physically it was accurate in terms of how far Ellen the bear was traveling. But you can see it's lost a bit of energy and spontaneity. So we kind of both confirmed, like, we have to kind of cheat a few things here. So this was me doing a few little cheats. We ended up scaling the bear. So as she leaps out, she's actually physically growing, just so we can fill the frame a bit more. But just to keep her on frame, we're having to like not move the bear at all. And then as soon as the camera starts to move that way, that's when she can start to move again. It looks...
Wow, that is a big jump.
It's a big jump, even though this looks kind of ridiculous there. In the end, looking at what we got from layout versus this, spirit's still the same, but this is what we're seeing when the animation and the camera are working in conjunction.
So for Ellen Bear, we wanted a really like heavy, imposing, and physical feeling. This is the one moment in the movie where she's really like terrifying, right?
Lunchtime! Oh no! Yay!
I'm Dylan Maxwell. I'm a character simulation technical director at PIXAR, and my job is to take the finished animation from the animator, add in the physical animation that would ride on top of that, like skin and fur and hair. And then we apply physics and then eventually artistic sculpting to every shot. So for Ellen Bear, we wanted a really like heavy, imposing, and physical feeling. I did some anatomical research and I called up as much reference as I could find. And then mostly it was about setting this sort of scope of how much motion we wanted and then defining the different regions. So here we can see an early version of the bear with just animation going on. And then we did first pass at simulation. It's sort of, here we can see it's very sort of rigid and we're getting certain folds in the haunches, and then eventually we get it to the place where we have just the right amount everywhere. So for this particular shot, if I turn off her fur, first we add the body, the simulation of the mass of flesh, and that has got this sort of vertical push on it right here. And then we can turn on a layer of skin simulation, which allows a sheet of geometry to slide back and forth on top of that body. And if I were to switch to sim hair, then we see this bunch of curves here. Each of them are a little spring system from root to tip, where the root is very locked and very stiff, and the tip is connected essentially by springs that resist bending all the way along, and they all bump into each other and they all follow the piece of skin that they're attached to. That's the original, and this is the simulated. You can see that all of the predictive work you do on the puppet doesn't leave room for things like this that the animator surely needed to do, because this was the frame he was trying to achieve, and surely he didn't want the other side of the lips to show here in the silhouette. So he just pulled that further away and cleared out that silhouette, which is super important for reading it quickly, which there's very little time to see it all, so you want to make sure that that frame, that tooth shows in silhouette. So we have a little bit of rustling in the bush, which was handled by another artist. The animation is here and we have good shapes, but it's all a little bit rigid. So my contribution, it's subtle, but it should feel a lot more visceral and heavy. The animator did a really fantastic job of making it really physical. Out of the box, this worked really well because of the hard work they did.
Anything that moves in a shot that's not a character with arms and legs, like water or fire or clouds, that needs to have intention would come to us. I'm Greg Gladstone. I'm an effects technical director at PIXAR. So for this shot, I worked on all the water that splashes up, the trail from Loaf Beaver as he swims away that you see at the very beginning of the shot. So when we start with the effect, we get what animation has already done. I have the whole environment. I have the bear here in the scene. I have the surrounding terrain, and more importantly, the plane that represents the water that he's going to go through. For the simulator, we take the water and we turn it into tons of little points. So the first thing we usually do in a shot like this is see if we can just throw all the information at the computer and let it simulate it and see if we can get a result. So in this case, you can see that lots of points are flying up all over the place. Typically when we do effects, we don't want to take away from the character. We want to add in just the amount of effect that we need to tell the story, but not cover up the performance. And we actually place each splash by hand wherever we want it to be when she's running through the water. So on this frame, we want a splash to happen, but we don't really care about all that surrounding water. We just care about the points that are going to come up the moment she hits it. And we designed this so that we can control the shape of the splash, vary the look of it, the height of it. We can take it and drag it around. And then one by one, we feed them into our simulator, and then we get a result that looks like this. The original one with all that 30 million points in the tank. We don't have tons of detail, and the splash isn't exactly where we want it, but when we put those hand-placed splashes in, they show up exactly where we want, when we want to see them. So we've created lots of points, and we have to change those points into something that we can render, and then we're going to convert it to a mesh, which is an actual surface that looks a little bit more like something you would see as water. And then, just to give you an idea what it looks like rendered, this is a comparison of that first attempt that I told you about. We let the simulator handle everything. You can kind of see on the top left here, none of the splashes are where we want to see them, and they're not showing up in frame in the final render over here on the top right. But by hand placing them, you can see they kind of end up right where they need to in the final shot over here on the right. The shot renders every night, and everybody that's working on the shot from the different departments tries to get their stuff checked in time for the shot. Shots usually start at about 7 o'clock. And they're ready when we come in the next morning. And then we all look at them together and see what looks awesome or what broke.
I'm John Lockwood. I'm an effects artist here at PIXAR. For this particular shot, I took care of the bush. So normally in effects, we deal with a lot of natural phenomenon. We'll deal with fire, water, destruction, things of that sort. But if it's something that's like rooted, like hair or fur, that just goes into like the simulation department. So vegetation for grass, you can think of that as, I don't know, earth fur. So we need to first look at what we're working with. We bring all of that in, leaves and stems and branches and everything. As is, it's just all one big mess of geometry. So we're gonna try and break those out and create somewhat of a rig. So a rig is like a skeleton. You can think about it, a lot of the terms it's in animation, right? For creating like a character, you need to have some sort of skeleton that allows all of the limbs and all of the muscles and everything to kind of move together. When you're looking at the bush, we kind of want it to move in a similar sort of way. We don't want to simulate everything at the same time. So what we're gonna do is create things called clusters. So we're gonna isolate particular portions of the bush first. You can start to see these gray bits that are forming. These are our geometry that allows us to cut it up into these little bite-sized pieces. Now we can see that we really simplified and kind of gotten rid of everything that we don't need. all of these curves and all of these spheres are skeletons. So wherever there's a sphere, that's like the joint, and then this would be the curve that you're seeing. This gives us a good way of knowing, okay, cool, everything's looking like it's connected. So in this case, I was prepping the bear just for this particular shot. Normally she looks like this, but I had to do a little bit of transformation, just grab her legs, pull them down, so she's gonna occupy a lot of that space under the bush. We don't necessarily need to keep our collision geometry accurate to the character at all the times. We can cheat, we can do things just to make sure the shot goes through. But for this particular shot, we're really looking at a lot of this deformation that's happened right here when she exits. So we get a lot of that nice parting, jumping through a little bit of that follow through motion in the back there. It is a quick shot, so it's one of those ones where it's like, you know, we can have a still camera and really appreciate it as the artist, but once it gets to the movie, people are like, it goes by like that. We do a quick snap over, and then boom, runs out. Looks great.
Usually an art director or an artist will give me some sort of painting, and that's always the inspiration for me. And I take what I see in terms of color, mood, balance, and I try and interpret that into lighting. My name is Rosalinda Malabiran. On Hoppers, I was the character lighting lead.
And my name is Matthew Cassagne. I'm a lighting technical director on a Hop.
What was tricky about this were a couple of things. As the bear comes out of the bushes, we want him to be red really quickly, but he also has to look integrated, coming out and then in the water and then as he goes by. So I had to add a light here to capture his mouth and his face, and then that same light wasn't going to work here. So then I had to either move the light or add an additional light because we wanted to make sure we saw the teeth and like the ferociousness. And then lastly, I would say the tricky part was the effects water droplets, to get those visible, but not too visible between, you know, the shading and the effects elements and then the lighting. Once those came together, I think it read really well.
This sequence went through a lot, and it was really complex. It was like pretty much a window to the world of Hop in terms of look. This is the final animation, and it kind of represents what, as lighter, we receive. This will be a render without any light, but that shows you placement of assets, vegetation, you know, water, and animation. And there's a lot of like leaf intersecting with each other, branches coming through. And then we start by, you know, placing light. So this is a 3D representation of this world, which gives you an idea of like, this is our camera, this is the bear, and then we have all those sphere lights, and depending on where the bear and the camera is framing the action, we had to place those lights so they represent the sunlight, but we couldn't use one light source. We had to, you know, cheat that like a set. Yeah, we have like 20 to 30 lights. This, by the way, is a tableau that shows you which light does what, and show you every light that affects the image, and then so this is the final, all the light composed together. We try most of the time to have lights, you know, that lights everything at once, but more often than not, when we get into shot lighting, we gotta be specific, and all that is a constant balancing each light and color and intensity to make it realistic.
Sometimes you'll work on the sequence yourself and do the whole entire thing by yourself. And then sometimes, because of production needs, you can't do everything, right? And so then other people help out, and you learn a lot that way.
This shot is a really good example of the PIXAR tenacity and passion to make things as good as they can, even though they're super challenging sometimes.
Hi, I'm Anne Fu. I work with the Lightspeed department at PIXAR. Yes, Lightspeed is the title. We're kind of unique to PIXAR. So usually we have to render a shot many, many times throughout development, and that can get really expensive really quickly. And so we go in and sort of make sure things are able to turn around in a reasonable amount of time. Basically, it just means we try and make things run faster and more efficiently while preserving the original artistic intent. So initially we noticed that the shots with this particular tree were resulting in much longer renders than other similar shots in the sequence. And part of our toolkit is these diagnostic renders. So this one in particular is a CPU heat map. It basically shows us sort of what parts of the frame are computationally complex. The brighter the color is, essentially the more time is being spent on those pixels. And so we work with various production departments to try and sort of narrow down what might be causing these expense. And so they gave us a version to test where the leaves were simplified significantly. So this is the resulting image from that. And you can see as I flip between these two CPU maps that it gets much, much dimmer. And if you look between the two, there is very little, if any, difference. Oftentimes it's kind of just getting rid of the stuff that's not really needed. Because artists tend to work from rough to fine, there's a lot of stuff that will be kept around that ultimately don't contribute to the final image. They essentially sort of take resources away from the stuff that actually matters in the scene. And the reason this is important is because, again, we'll be rendering this many, many, many times throughout the production of the shot. And the more expensive it is, the slower that iteration time will be. So anything we can do to bring it down helps production significantly.
That's music by our composer, Mark Mothersbaugh. You hear those synthesizers in there. That is a signature sound for this film. Hi, I'm Axel Geddes. I'm an editor. That's where all the pieces of the movie come together. We got Mabel, we've got Ellen. In fact, we even have Loaf floating downstream at the beginning of the shot. And then Ellen comes out. It all happens in the same shot. We needed to sit on the shot a little longer and make sure that the audience is actually seeing the bush shaking a little bit. Originally, after a shot like this, you'd be thinking, oh, I'm gonna be looking at Loaf, or I'm gonna be looking at Mabel. So we have to wait for the audience to kind of figure this out. And then once we know we're gonna be looking there, that's when you can introduce Ellen. And that's one of the things I'm always looking for is what we call eye fix, which is from one cut to a next, where is your eye on screen? And ideally at the beginning of a shot, your eye is very close to where your eye was in the previous shot. So your eye doesn't have to look, where am I looking on screen? But because of the size of the actual set, we couldn't get all of the information in that all at once. So we tried a version, it's one of the early versions we did in layout. Just kind of loses some of the punch to it. It doesn't have that, that zip that the boards version had. So we tried on going over Mabel's shoulder. But once we'd rewritten it, it just didn't feel right anymore. So then we went to this last version. Having this whip pan here and going to this and almost, and it's not a point of view of Mabel's, but it's an implied point of view, really kind of felt like I could have my cake and eat it too. It's a little bit of a trickery that we make it feel like it's jumping out at her, even though it's not a POV. And I love that kind of thing. I love it when we can, play around with those things and cheat a little bit, That's filmmaking.